All right, my friends, it looks like we're live. Want to welcome you today. We are going to be talking today about some costly year-end major gift mistakes that you're going to want to avoid. And we'll be talking about how you can fix them if you're already making some of these sneaky mistakes. So if you're just joining us, I want to say welcome, welcome. I'd love to hear from you. Go ahead and drop a comment below and let me know where you are joining us from. Love to hear where you're joining us from. And while you do that, if we haven't met yet, my name is Emma Luzzi, and I help fundraising teams build the skills, the systems, and the strategies they need to raise more major gifts for their nonprofit. So if you are just joining us, come on in. Let me know where you're joining from. Go ahead and drop a comment below. And if you're catching up on the replay, I'd love to hear from you too. Go ahead and use the hashtag replay when you make a comment. And I always come back, check out the comments, respond to your comments if you have any questions. So got my colleague here, Shanna, who's going to keep an eye on comments. Okay, great. We see them coming in. Hello, Jill. So good to see you. Always nice to see familiar faces. We have some folks who come to these live sessions. They run relatively monthly. Hello, Anthony, who is joining us from New York City. So come on in and drop a comment below and let us know where you're joining from. And the topic I am going to be diving into today is all about mistakes you may be making that are impacting your major gift revenue. And these are very specific to year end. Hello, Kimberly. Welcome. Thanks for joining us. So many of you may have heard the statistic that I want to kick off this session with. And it's always worth a reminder, even though you may already be familiar with this. And that is, on average, nonprofits tend to raise approximately 30% of their overall fundraising revenue for the year in these last few weeks of year end. So it's really important and it's really valuable and worthwhile, which is why you are smart for showing up today, even though you're very busy, to take a pause and actually make sure that you are making the best possible use of your time, which is going to be a big theme this session, between now and year end, because there's a lot at stake. If we're talking about 30% of your overall revenue all coming in these last few weeks of the years, there's lots of ways that you can maximize that, and we'll be talking about that today. All right, so hello, Rob. Thanks for joining us. I'm going to go ahead and dive into mistake number one, and that is failing to protect your most important asset. And to me, your most important asset, especially at this time of year, is your time. Now, what I see a lot of fundraisers falling into, including myself, is getting into more of a reactive time management position, especially as we get closer to year end, because the busier we get, the easier it gets to become more reactive when we're managing our time. And I'll give you an example of this, one that I've fallen into in the past few weeks that I really have to check myself around, is starting my day in my inbox, starting my day responding to emails. And the real challenge there is when we do that, we're basically letting other people decide how to prioritize our time. So I really want to encourage you, if you are finding yourself falling into that reactive time management mode that becomes so common at this time of year, just to really check that out and take a pause and see if that makes the most sense for you, because our time is so valuable right now. You know, when we're constantly responding to those immediate demands, emails, and the requests that are coming in, what we're not doing is planning and prioritizing our major gift work. You may have heard me talk about this before, but major gift work is so challenging in that it is important, but it's not urgent. You've probably heard of this before. You've probably heard of the Eisenhower matrix, which may be worth going a whole nother session into. But, you know, the important and not urgent are those things that so often end up falling off our plates in favor of those things that are both important and urgent. In fact, you probably have a lot of those on your plate right now. What do those look like? They may look like foundation grant proposals that have a deadline attached to them. For your organization, maybe it looks like a big fundraising gala because it's event season and all of your time is being taken up by responding and reacting to that, right? So what's really, really important, if we, granted, some of those things absolutely have to happen, if we allow those to exclusively drive our priority setting and our fundraising at year end, what happens is the major gift work doesn't get done. Because at its heart, good major gift work is all about building deep and meaningful relationships. It's about cultivation, it's about great stewardship, and often it doesn't have a deadline attached. So you can see how easy it is for that to fall off your plate or fall off your radar if you are taking more of a reactive approach to your time management. So let me know in the comments, do you, like I admitted I did, do you fall into that trap of reactive time management? I want you to go ahead and say reactive in the comments if you're with me and you find yourself falling into the reactive time management trap, especially when things get busy at year end. I'm also promised to you that I am going to talk to you a bit about how to fix these mistakes if you are making them, because they are so common. And as I give myself as an example all the way along, even some of us as the most seasoned fundraisers can find ourselves falling into these habits, and these challenges are very common. So I do want you to know, if this is happening to you, you're absolutely not alone. You're in very good company. So let's go ahead. You let me know if you're falling into reactive time management at this time of year. Go ahead and drop the word reactive in the comments below. And I will also guarantee you that other folks here are having that same experience. Let's talk a little bit more about how to fix this reactive time management stance that can end up actually quite severely impacting your major gift results, especially when it comes to year end. Yes, Anthony, it's so easy to fall into that responding, reacting trap. Yes, reactive for sure. So one thing I wanted to share with you is the power of strategic time blocking. And I'm going to address any objections you may have to this, because I've heard from some of my clients lately, they're like, well, time blocking's great, but what if I actually don't have any time to block? So I'm going to set that aside just in case you're thinking that, and talk a little bit more about how important strategic time blocking is. Especially at this time of year, there can be immense amount of value in going through your calendar and just blocking out even a small increment of time on a weekly basis to focus on that major gift work that is so important but not urgent. Because if it doesn't end up getting scheduled into our calendar, chances are it's not going to get done. So I really want to encourage you to think about blocking that time out. I'm sure it's not the first time you've heard this, but like so many things, people are often quite familiar with this technique, but don't necessarily implement it on a regular basis. So I really encourage you to take that knowledge and implement it, even if you are just blocking out small time increments in your calendar. I really recommend thinking about blocking out by the hour, but if that's too challenging for you, even blocking out by the half an hour to focus on this important but not urgent major gift work is incredibly valuable. And I also just want to talk about the power of, I'll call it compound time blocking, right? Is actually being really regular about implementing this and blocking out even small amounts of time on your calendar. Just to give you a really, a really sort of generalized example, let's say you do this for an hour a week and you're really, really mindful about this and you stick with it. If you think over the course of a year, those increments over the course of time actually end up adding up to a full-time week over the course of time. And the same thing holds to this for you at year end. If you start scheduling in some time for yourself now between now and the holiday break, you could actually end up getting like a full-time day or two in there. Maybe you're going to be more ambitious, but time's a real challenge for you. Spending a full-time day or two on your most important major gift work between now and the end of the year is so much better than spending 0 days on your major gift work. All right, thank you. Hi, welcome. Welcome, Donna and Shannon. Time blocking is so important to me. I love this, that folks are actually using this. And if you're not, do give that a try. And do think about starting with even those small blocks of focused time, and think about those time blocks compounding over time and that incremental time adding up. All right. For those of you who, like several of my clients lately, say time blocking is nice, but there has to actually be some time on my calendar to block out, I want to talk about the importance of defending your major gift time fiercely. And what that means is starting to get better at saying no. I've been talking about this a lot lately, about saying no and about setting boundaries at work. And I'm actually interested in maybe covering this in more depth in my next live session. So if you're interested in that, let me know. If you'd love to hear more about the how-to of a considered no, how to say no, how to set boundaries at work, how to say no to your donor, to your boss, to your colleagues. If that sounds interesting, I'd say yes below. We won't say no. Say yes below and let me know if that sounds interesting. So it's a lot to dive into here. So I'm just going to touch on it and say, come back to us next month if you're interested in learning more detail about saying no and setting boundaries. But it's something really important for you to start considering right now. I think we're conditioned often, for a lot of us, we're conditioned not to say no, to always say yes. And I think it's really important to start flexing that no muscle. And you can do it in small ways. You can do it in terms of saying no to maybe non-essential requests that are slightly lower stakes, but saying no and protecting your time is really crucial. And a great tip here can be, especially like with your colleagues, is talk to them about the fact that you're implementing this time blocking system. And you may want to talk to them about the fact that, between 10 and 11 every morning, I am actually blocking out my time to work on my highest priorities. And that for me is going to be donor calls, right? So actually sharing these priorities with your colleagues can be really helpful in two ways. One is it's a sort of gentler way to set some boundaries and say no. But two, it also piques interest with folks. And they might say, especially if you're leading a team, they might say, oh, this is something that I can do, actually, like set aside focus time, block my time to work on my highest priorities. So do think about doing that. And, again, really want to encourage you that even the smallest increments of time can add up to have impact if you're feeling time challenged right now. All right, so I am going to go ahead and move on to the second mistake. So I spent quite a bit of time on number one, because I think it's very, very important. Take a bit of a sip of my water. Mistake number two I see is over-relying on emails. So that's mistake number two, over-relying on emails. I want to be clear here when I'm talking about emails, I'm talking about this in the context of major gift fundraising. I'm not talking about your year-end email campaigns, your year-end annual campaigns. Separate thing here. What I'm talking about is over-relying on your emails in major gift fundraising. And this is becoming more and more common because what I see is that folks are feeling really reluctant to pick up the old 500-pound phone. So in over-relying on your emails, what can happen is that you get a sense of, now there is a spot for email in major gift fundraising, but it shouldn't be the central spot, right? It can be useful for following up, for initiating, booking a meeting. But what I see too often is that folks end up substituting that for other deeper relationship building, conversation-based connections. For a couple of reasons. A, email is fast and easy. You can sit down and you can fire a bunch in the med at the same time and feel like you've made a lot of progress. B, perhaps more important here, is that email feels a lot more comfortable than picking up the phone and calling your donors. All right, who here can resonate with that? Who here feels a little bit reluctant about picking up the phone to have conversations with our donors? If that's you, you are going to be in very good company as well. So Well, I want to talk about this because I think this is especially important for this time of year. And in fact, if you want to put all these mistakes and how to fix them together, one big recommendation from me would be to block out that time and prioritize those donor conversations. And prioritizing those donor conversations looks like picking up the phone, because you may not actually have time to book that in-person meeting between now and the end of the year, but you sure do have time for deepening your relationships by having a great conversation on the phone. So I'm curious, who here, who loves the phone? Who's team phone? Who is team not phone? Go ahead and drop that in the comments and let me know, because I think we're increasingly seeing folks feeling reluctant to pick up that phone. You know, I think to fix this mistake, it can be a little more challenging. Part of this is really about getting practice. So what I may say, if you feel a little uncomfortable with the phone, you might want to think about going ahead and starting with those donors who feel a little lower stakes. Maybe it's donors who are more known to you, who you've met before, who you have a connection with. Maybe you prioritize those just to warm yourself up if you are feeling a little reluctant to pick up that phone. So that's one idea for you. If you are somebody who, for whatever reason, I know there can be so many reasons we're uncomfortable with the phone, but it's such a useful and important tool for you as a major gift fundraiser. Starting to build those skills is really important. So that would be one tip, is starting with those donors that are maybe a little warmer, that maybe feel a little more comfortable, just building up that, warming up that phone muscle. Anthony's saying, love phone, but find donors are more reluctant to phone. Okay, so say more about that, Anthony. So they're not enjoying phone calls. That may also be another, another conversation to have, is what are we actually talking about? What are we actually offering when we're picking up the phone? Or what I like to say often is, what's in it for me as a donor? I want to know when you're calling me, what's in it for me, right? So I love this. Taylor, yes, I love this. This is what I did when I came back from my mat leave in September. I started by calling donors I was closest to, just to get more comfortable. I love this. It just works really well. Can help build up that momentum and that confidence. Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I just want to wrap that up. I'm seeing a couple more comments that come in, but I'm mindful of the time. So I like to keep these conversations to about 30 minutes. Knowing that you are busy. But let me make sure I have covered all of this section off. So thinking about using that time block time to have more meaningful conversations with your donors, making sure you're picking up that phone, thinking about maybe warming up before you do that with those donors closest to you. And I would say create a priority list as well. It can feel really overwhelming, and this is what we often see. It's human nature that we see, oh my, I've got 150 donors to call, and then we get overwhelmed and it doesn't happen because we can't possibly see how we're going to find the time to call 150 donors. So do think about, at this busy year-end time, don't go into this thinking, I got to find the time to call 150 donors. Go into this thinking, I'm going to find the time to call my top 10 or 15 donors. If this is something, if you're not working on major gifts full time, if you are working on major gifts full time, I encourage you to be more ambitious. But if you do have other fundraising types in your portfolio, do think about prioritizing and making it manageable for yourself, and making sure that you're connecting with those top folks in your portfolio. So those are a couple of tips there around picking up the phone. And I want to just end this comment by saying, because people are more and more reluctant to pick up the phone to call their donors, this will also really help you stand out as well, which I think in a very positive way. So I really want to encourage you to go ahead and work up to picking up that phone. Take a great example from Taylor, who did the warming up by calling those folks closest to him first, just to build that muscle and build that confidence. All right, mistake number 3 is actually quite closely connected to mistake number 2. And that is making assumptions about your donors, making assumptions about what your donors want. Okay. I see this happening, and I've seen this happening for 25 years as a frontline fundraiser, and it happens both at the personal level for us as fundraisers, what's going in our own going on in our own brains, And I also see it happening at the sectoral level. And I want to give you a couple of examples here and talk about how making assumptions impacts our fundraising results. So I'm going to use a simple example to start off with that's connected to our last mistake, not picking up, over relying on email, not picking up the phone. Here's an assumption I hear from a lot of folks. I hear at its most basic level, fundraisers saying, I just don't think my donors actually want to hear from me. I don't think they want to be phoned by me. I don't feel like I have anything to say to them. So we're starting off from that place of making an assumption about our donor that is based in what's going on in our own brains, right? So we're making assumptions about our donors that are getting in the way of actually having more meaningful conversations instead of having conversations with them and actually asking. So I really want you to be cautious about this, making assumptions about donors, because I've seen it do so much damage to organizations and fundraising overall, beyond even the individual level of the assumptions we're making and the thoughts that we're having as we're going into or making decisions about how to interact with our donors. What I see happening at the sectoral level is that almost every year there's some sort of news about giving being down, about the economic downturn impacting donor capacity. Very timely right now. This is a terrible time to be fundraising with donors because of the upcoming election. So those are really great examples of like high level assumptions that are being made, or news that is out there that we are then turning into making assumptions about our donors and not taking action with them. So does that make sense for folks? We make assumptions without speaking to our donors, and this is just the nature of our human brains. This is what we do, and it's very normal and natural. But we really want to watch out for that, is making sure that assumptions aren't getting in the way of us actually taking action and booking a conversation with our donors instead of making assumptions about what they want, right? They don't want a phone call. They don't want to hear from me. I'm not important enough. Economic downturn is going to mean that they're not going to be able to give this year, right? Those are all examples that are quite common of assumptions that we make that then get in the way of us taking action and actually having conversations to confirm this. And maybe when we talk to our donors, we do confirm this sometimes, but that's just one donor, right? It's just one donor. So I want to encourage you to really think about this and to watch out for this when you're doing your year-end fundraising, because this is just the way our brains work, right? We have a negativity bias in our brains. It's very natural, that basically tunes us into the bad news, the negative things. And it can be hard if we're not conscious about that to note it and take action. And I want to be clear that this is not positive thinking or toxic positivity. It is simply actually having the conversation with the donor before we make a decision on their behalf, right? Having the conversation before we decide that they're not going to be able to give. Contacting them and trying to book the meaningful conversation on the phone before we decide that they don't want to hear from us and they don't want a phone call, right? Does that make sense to folks? It can be very challenging. It can be very challenging for sure to spot and overcome these challenges. Jill says, yes, election has given us pause to make calls. And that can be very reasonable in the sense of sometimes that's a strategic decision, right? Sometimes we take information and make strategic decisions about it. Like, let's not call folks on November 5th. But we just need to be careful about when it tips over from a strategic decision into an assumption that is impacting our fundraising poorly, right? And in fact, I find elections interesting because what can happen is that it gets folks thinking about what's really important to them, what they want to take action on, what causes and issues are really crucial to them. And it can in many ways, see, there's a flipping of the coin here. In many ways, it can be a prime time because people are thinking about these bigger picture issues and causes that are important to them, right? So just to give you a slightly different perspective there. So mistake number 3, I really want you to watch out about making assumptions about your donors, and a fairly simple fix for that, I don't spend a lot of time on the fix here. Just watch out for them, and actually be aware. Let's say you are time blocking and picking up the phone to call more donors. Just have a look at what's in there. Just have a look at what's in there in terms of what assumptions you're making and how it's actually impacting your fundraising, your actions, and your results. All right. So mistake number 4, I wanted to talk about the mistake that is very common in our sector, and that is simply spreading yourself and your organization too thin when it comes to fundraising. Right. And this is, I often call, is like the trap of trying to do absolutely everything. Right. And this is so easy to fall into right now in the fast-paced world of fundraising. There's so many things, there's so many shiny objects, there's so many opportunities that we can take to raise more funds. And it can be especially challenging to kind of fall into this trap of trying to do too much at year end, right? Especially when pressure's on to meet our revenue targets. Basically, where we tend to go is, if we want to raise more money, we need to be doing more. And I want to tell you that equation is broken. If you want to raise more money, it does not equal doing more things. What it does equal is making sure that you are setting clear priorities for your organization and avoiding that piling on of the activities and the tactics, and saying yes to every opportunity that comes your way. Because the simple fact of it is, when everything is a priority, nothing is. And that's going to ultimately end up impacting your fundraising, right? So as you progress and grow, both as an organization and as a fundraiser, making sure that you're staying really clearly focused and really, I'm going to say, ruthless about your priorities. It's very, very important, because if you find yourself juggling too much, saying yes to everything, saying no to nothing, what happens is you're spreading yourself way too thin. And oh my goodness, I'm going to forget that someone can drop this author's name in the comments if you remember. He wrote The Essentialist, and I love his quote. It's Greg. Somebody drop his last name it's slipping me away. But he wrote The Essentialist, and in that book is a quote that I think about and share all the time. And that is basically to sum it up. I'm sure I'm not quoting it exactly. When you don't set your priorities and you're not clear on your priorities, what ends up happening is that you make a millimeter of progress in a million different directions. A millimeter of progress in a million different directions. We don't want that, right? We don't want that, because that does not equal the revenue that you need to make the change that your organization is trying to achieve in this world, and the impact they're trying to achieve. Greg McCowan, thank you. Colleague Shanna, who is always on top of my brain lapses. Yes, so I love that quote, and I keep that in mind all the time. So something that you might find helpful too is that when everything is a priority and nothing is, and you're making a millimeter of progress in a million different directions, it's ultimately not going to have the impact that you want or need to on your overall fundraising results. All right. So we don't want to spread ourselves too thin. What I'd recommend here as a fix is, just, if you haven't already, get really clear on what your priorities are between now and year end. And I would push you even further to say, what is your number one priority? What is the one thing that matters the most, that is going to move the needle the most between now and December 31st? What is your one priority that's going to have the greatest impact between now and December 31st, right? And Rob's sharing, very true. If you don't set your own priorities, other people will. That's a great example when you log into your email in the morning, right? That's a great example of a small way that other people set your priorities instead of you setting them yourselves. So I'd love to hear from you. What is your one priority that you want to focus on between now and year end that's going to move the needle the most for your organization? You may notice if this is your first time with us here in these sessions are live and interactive, and I'm often asking you questions. So that's my takeaway. Whether you decide that now and drop it in the comments, or you take that away as your homework, I need to decide what my one priority is in this context. I'll encourage you to think about it pertaining to your major gifts. What's my one major gift priority between now and the end of the year? So I love this. I'd love to hear from you as we wrap up, because it is 1:30. So I'm going to do a quick recap and talk about what I talked about today. So I shared 4 costly year-end fundraising mistakes. First, we talked about failing to protect your time. And the fix here was doing some time blocking, even if it's incremental, because that adds up and has impact. Relying too heavily on emails and not having those conversations you need to be having with donors, not picking up the phone or otherwise booking meetings so you can deepen those relationships that way. Number 3, we talked about the real risks inherent in making assumptions about your donors, whether or not that is you at a person-to-person level thinking, I don't think my donor wants to get a phone call from me, or whether that's really taking too much on board the sectoral level worries about giving being down and that impacting and making your assumptions about whether or not your donors are going to give. Let's watch out and just identify those assumptions. That's your first step towards fixing this issue. And finally, we talked about spreading yourself too thin and making sure that you aren't making a millimeter of progress in a million different directions. And the fix for that being, make sure that you are setting your priorities. So I'd still love to hear from you. What's your number one priority between now and the end of the year? Go ahead and drop that in the comments and make a commitment to us here. All right, so with that, I want to encourage you, if you've enjoyed these lives, I do them every month, and if you want to be the first to hear about them, I encourage you to sign up for my newsletter. You can do that. It's called Major Gift Insider, and you can do that on my website at blueskyphilanthropy.com/subscribe. So it's blueskyphilanthropy.com/subscribe. Anthony, I love your priority. Anthony is going to speak with 50% more donors in person or on the phone by year end. I love this so much because A, it's measurable. You can actually measure this. Have you increased your calls by 50%? Hoping this generates deeper mutual understanding and more giving to support our work. I love this, Anthony. This is a great priority. I love that it's measurable. I love that it's very clear and it's very focused. All right. Kimberly wants to try and meet with a minimum of 5 donors in person to learn more about them and what they're passionate about. This is also an amazing priority. And I think this is a great example of how you can scale these ideas up or down, depending on if you are in a dedicated major gift position or if you are working across different portfolios. You can still apply these ideas. And I love this idea of saying, okay, I just want to meet with 5 donors. I want to meet with them in person and find out what they're passionate about. I feel like that is an amazing priority to set for yourself between now and year end, Kimberly. Congratulations. So go ahead, let me know. Even if I'm signing off now, I always come back and check the comments. So go ahead and let us know what's your priority between now and the end of the year. And the value in this can also be actually like writing this down and putting it somewhere, and having other folks read it can help you keep accountable to that priority, which can be especially important when you start feeling that pressure to do the reactive time management and to let other people decide on your priorities. Come back to this one priority and let me know how it goes. So I would love you to stay in touch. Let me know how it goes with your priority between now and year end. And I look forward to seeing you in November. I always welcome you. If you have any ideas for our lives, topics you'd love to talk about, drop me a line, let me know, leave me a comment here. All right, my friends, and do stay in touch. Make sure you check out my newsletter, Major Gift Insider, blueskyphilanthropy.com/subscribe. We'll see you next time, and have a great year-end fundraising season. You've got this.